As a recap, for those who may be joining us in this conversation, middle housing, AKA the missing middle, is a category of homes which are commonly characterized by duplexes, triplexes, townhouses, cottage clusters, and courtyard housing. Generally, these houses are considered smaller alternatives to our single family dwellings, but intended to be compatible in the size and scale with single family or traditional neighborhoods. Pretty customary with the middle housing review is a look at parking and parking requirements. Commonly, looked at because middle housing is intended to be more affordable, a smaller product, and made and developed consistently with a lot of infill housing types in areas that really, as you heard before, actually earlier tonight, were laid out and built without our current parking requirements. So what we've heard to date, and what we've heard is from Planning Commission as well as members of the public, is to be mindful of the amount of parking you do put in place. Make sure that we're not adding parking at the expense of some open space development, to be mindful and allow the market to do its work, but also to be very mindful of Hood River's circumstance and our typical vehicle and lifestyle choices, and some limited transportation options, as well as the request to don't succumb to the same narrative. As we state, we want to develop something different and diversify our housing stock. Don't continue to do the same thing. Don't continue to ask for the same requirements. So as staff and hearing some of those things, we're really been trying to blend the needs of Hood River and really keep true to the goals of providing some of these smaller housing types. So really you end up with a parking scenario where the concern of adding parking will drive up our unit sizes, and the cost of these dwellings will take away from on-street parking, will occupy a greater amounts of area that could be used for dwelling units or for dwelling in buildable area as well as landscape area. To the contrary of that, with the understanding that parking reduction, when we don't see or any real behavioral changes for us who drive cars and who drive to work, who rely on these vehicles, we should anticipate that additional on-street parking demands will be realized. That as more users rely on the on-street parking system, most likely requiring greater management or some street design considerations. Allowing or providing for on-street parking or reducing the amount of access so that we maximize our parking requirements. Currently, our code for our middle housing types, be it duplex, triplex, cottage, will require 2 spaces per dwelling unit. That's what the existing municipal code requires for each of them, regardless of the size, whether it's 800 square feet, whether it's 8,000, you're at 2 spaces per dwelling unit. And again, we've seen this increase dwelling size. We're in our code, we've looked at the impacts of this on really the number of garages, the amount of curb space that we end up eroding, and the amount of front yards, as illustrated here on the in your city examples of what happens when you start loading, a lot of cars off street. So the proposed draft in your packet really assumes a minimum of requirement of 1 off-street space per dwelling unit, which represents a reduction from the current standard, but is not so aggressive as it ignores the reality that we will either have people who rely on their vehicles, or we have people who will rely on their garages for storage. But ideally, it's paired with the standards to reduce the amount of curb cuts, to share access points, and to keep some on-street parking available.
Megan? and then Tim.
Yeah, Dustin, are townhouses part of the missing middle? Would they go down to 1 space per unit?
So typically they're categorized in the canon of missing middle. We don't have them included within this chapter. So a full scale townhouse that is built basically under the current townhouse regulations, which I believe is 1719 of the code and follows that rules, wouldn't be reduced.
Okay, because yeah, I guess on my end, I see the value in reducing a disincentive or adding an incentive to do these smaller missing middle types, but especially given our second conversation, I would hate to add an incentive to do more of these townhomes if that's already where the incentive is. So it sounds like that's already not an issue, so thank you.
Yeah, the code intentionally kind of bifurcates the kind of smaller compact, although similar, could be attached to the large format, really the typical townhouse that we see now.
Tim, did you have a question?
Thanks, Mayor. One of the things that I was wondering is, obviously the capacity for neighborhoods to absorb on-street parking is not going to be the same across neighborhoods. Or maybe it is. Maybe there's enough on-street parking right now for it to absorb everything. Do you have a feel for that? I mean, it seems like we're talking in really vague terms about trying to not make it so bad, but not really having an idea specifically of what the implications are.
Well, I think in general across the board, you're going to see, the demand for on-street parking, again, without the behavioral change across the board, will go up. We haven't done an analysis of all the neighborhoods and how they fare and what their parking absorption is, similar to what we did downtown. Where we looked at what was, we did kind of a parking analysis and backed into a number on what the rate was. We haven't done that for individual neighborhoods here.
Right. Would that be, as you proceed through approving all of these changes and potentially a variety of different developments in a particular neighborhood, it seems like something you'd want to keep track of, right?
Yeah, and that's where, I think I mentioned that the idea of parking management becomes an issue, or it becomes an option to regulate parking in areas that become increasingly congested. So if we did started to experience congestion and parking, the current code does allow residential to get into their some residential parking enforcement options. That's already in the code. We haven't seen anyone really take it up, but that is on the books and it is an option now.
Right.
I'd be happy to do some mathematics for you.
Other questions? Mark? And then Jessica?
You just mentioned going up. I see that all these drawings are detached configurations. A, are there attached configurations? And B, can you do two on top of each other and have more open space is an option within this rule set? So take one of your 6 housing configurations. Could it be 3 2-stories and a tree?
Yeah, most of them are intended to have the opportunity to be attached and detached. It does, when they become attached, they start freeing up some more real estate because of they don't have side yards, or they lose one side yard.
Right.
In terms of vertical, it is an option. I think we were, as the code folks, less high on that because of probably some limitations on condo development and difficulties of just seeing that happen as compared to ground level units. But it's a possibility, including actually in your packet, one of the 3 flats shows a duplex, a stacked duplex, and a single cottage. That's a vertical stack that really reduces some of the real estate. But I just think we're not intentionally avoiding that, but I think the likelihood of that getting built and us getting stacked units becomes, it's just going to be a challenge on the marketplace to see it delivered.
Tim?
Thanks, Mayor. I guess kind of getting back to a point that was brought up in public comment. Are there developers reviewing these? Are they looped into this at all? Are you seeking input from them about, we were having a lot of discussions about marketability and buildability.
Yes, there's been a couple people who we've been in conversation with, both local developers as well as going through our consultant, who's a professional architect, professional architecture firm in Portland, to try to broaden that reach. There's, and the marketability question that we talked about generally came from that group, from real estate and development team. So there's, that's been some of the commentary, and we have been outreaching with them. So.
And one brief follow-up that, I think reducing the parking requirements makes sense, but, it would be great to go into that with our eyes wide open and aware of the consequences and appetite for particular neighborhoods to absorb that type of pressure.
And that's the full disclosure part of what we wanted to speak to, is that this could, June, just like, not like dissimilar to the conversations downtown, this management and stress on street is a realistic possibility if we don't see behavior change.
Yeah, I'm for reducing the number required. So in general, I'm fine with going with a smaller number of parking spaces. I think I heard, Megan, what are your thoughts? I think I've heard everyone else, what they're thinking about, smaller parking requirements were okay, but what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to try out the 1 space per unit. It sounds like, at least in this draft stuff, they're all definitely smaller units. And, I guess looking at the pictures, which again, yes, are definitely helpful, seems like it's kind of necessary if we actually want to get these units built.
Okay. And I want to acknowledge that we received some written testimony this afternoon, because I know sometimes, if we don't mention it, people wonder, well, what the heck, did you even read what I said? It might not be what we are coming up with as we speak tonight. But rest assured, all the written comments that came in today, we all got those and we're able to read those today regarding this subject. Have you got your input you need, Dustin, on that then?
I did. If we're ready to move on to my next issue.